Hello there, and welcome to Imagine Spotlights, a weekly video series co-produced by the American Diabetes Association and Beyond Type 1. I'm your host, Rob Howe, creator of the Diabetics Doing Things podcast. Every week on Imagine Spotlights, I'll talk to an amazing individual living with type 1 diabetes. Thank you for joining us, and let's get this party started. Welcome back, campers. Welcome back to Imagine Camp, and we are here again for the Imagine Spotlight series. It's me, Rob Howe, from Diabetics Doing Things, and I'm super excited to be here. Thanks so much to the American Diabetes Association and to Beyond Type 1 for making this possible. And I have a treat for all of you today. I'm going to get really close to you all now. I'd love to introduce you guys to the incomparable Victor Garber. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. This means a lot to me, and diabetic camp is in my past. I can tell you that.
Well, I cannot wait to talk about your experiences at camp. But let's talk a little bit. I don't want to read your entire resume to you because it's just you and me here for the campers.
Please.
But you are an actor. And you've had diabetes for many years, and I'm so excited to talk through the journey from when you were first diagnosed to where we are today.
Over 50 years.
That's crazy because you don't look a day over 40. I don't understand.
Well, that's good lighting.
that's what we get when we work with the pros. So why don't you tell us, how long have you had diabetes, and what has it been like going from day one to where you are today?
Oh, well, it's a lifetime is what it is. I was diagnosed when I was in the early 60s. So that's a long time ago. I think I was 12. And yes, so I'm 71. So yeah. So it was a long time ago. And I'm very bad with time. But it was devastating. I was completely unknown in our little town, although I did have a distant cousin who was a type 1 diabetic who I used to watch her give her injections and thought it was amazing, and I was fascinated by it. I developed it at that age, and then I left home when I was 16, so I hadn't had it very long before I left home and moved on with my life, because I left school. I wanted to be a folk singer, I wanted to be an actor. And where I lived, I couldn't do any of those things. So when I look back now, and I was at the TDF Children's Congress, and I saw all these young kids, and I saw these like 15, 16-year-olds. I thought I was that age when I did what I did, and I can't believe I did it. But my parents were very supportive, terrified, but supportive. And so I was fortunate that I didn't have too many serious incidents or complications during that time, but I didn't really take control of my diabetes till much later in my life, and I'm forever grateful that I did, obviously. And I urge anybody out there who's having issues about pods and Dexcoms and everything. It's really, if you're especially for young kids, it's really a bold step, but I urge you to take it because it will make a huge difference in your life. And here's the other thing: you will be loved anyway. People will love you, even with your Dexcom and your Omnipod hanging off you. And that's so not what it's about. And I know it's hard at 12 or 13 or 14, but I urge you to be bold.
And, I am often inspired, and I'll share a little bit of story from myself. Inspired by people like yourself who have lived with diabetes for, over 50 years in your case, where the technology back then, there were no Dexcoms or pods, right? There were, peeing on keto sticks and boiling syringes. But I look at, so I'd love to hear a little bit about what that was like for you initially, or what you remember about the early days and the challenges.
I remember just thinking it was annoying to have to do all of this, but I kind of took it on in a kind of, I think, a responsible way. But boiling syringes every day. I don't remember taking a lot of shots, but I do remember it was certainly morning, afternoon, and evening. I think, and then we had what they called Clinitest tablets that you would you pee in a jar, and then you would take an eyedropper and you would in a test tube you would squeeze 10 drops of urine and then 20 drops of water, and then put this test, and it was bubble up, and if it turned orange, you knew you were in trouble, but if it turned blue, you knew you were okay. And mine was more orange than blue most of the time, and it was and of course years later you find out that it actually was pointless, because it is not an accurate reading of your blood sugar, but it does give you a sense of how badly off you are. And so that was seemed like it would go on forever. And then I can't remember when the finger pricks started, but boy, that was like a heaven. That was heaven.
Well, and I love to hear those stories about, doing a science experiment in the restroom just to see if you're okay, and then finding out that you're not, and then years later learning that was really what your blood sugar was 4 hours ago and not really particularly accurate. And
but yet, like, when you don't know that, that's your reality, and so you live accordingly, and you think, oh, I shouldn't have had that Danish I had for breakfast, which I often did when I was 16 and living alone in Toronto. But you do the best you
can. And I think what gives me the most hope is that even after all those obstacles, you lived the life that you wanted to live. You lived boldly, you lived beyond, and you were able to chase the dreams that you wanted for yourself, even early on.
Yes.
And I'd love to talk, you mentioned this a little bit earlier. You went to diabetes camp. What do you remember about your camp experience?
My mother insisted that I go to this camp. It was in Ottawa, Ontario. I'm Canadian, and it was, I think, the only camp of its kind in Canada at the time. And it was, I can't remember where exactly, but that doesn't matter. But I didn't want to go. I was adamant about not going, mostly because I was a very self-conscious kid, and I was not comfortable doing sports, and I thought this is going to be humiliating. I was really, really angry, and my parents talked me into it. It insisted that I go, and I think I was 12 or 13, and it was life-changing. It was, I couldn't believe how much I loved going. I was in a community of people like me, and everybody was so compassionate and kind and helpful, and we laughed so much, and it really, really was life-changing for me. And that's why I wanted to do this, because I think these organizations and these communities you have to feel like you're not alone. So many kids do in different parts of the world, and of course now with the internet and everything, it's much easier to feel connected. But when you're actually in a place, sleeping in cabins with other people who are having low blood sugars and who are in trouble, and you feel like, oh, I'm okay. You just feel like you're okay, and that's really an important mindset for any type 1 diabetic, to realize that you're not alone, that it doesn't define you, that's not who you are. It's only a part of who you are. And that's, I think, what saved me and allowed me to go on and pursue everything that I pursued, because I was so determined. And you have to be determined. It's a mindset, and you have to really work hard to get there.
And I know that, this year, because camp is not possible, it's not safe for us all to be together. There are people watching today who have cabins, virtual cabins, and are meeting friends with diabetes from all over the country, and are in our own virtual, internet cabins, and are here today making new friends, and, hearing from people like yourself, who I couldn't agree more. I also did not want to go to diabetes camp. The story I like to tell now is that I thought I was too smart and I knew everything, and I was too cool. I thought that, diabetes camp would not be cool, and I could not have been more wrong.
Right.
And, in the last few years, it's been
fear is a very deceptive thing. Usually there's always a root of fear, and terror.
Well, and I'm sure, like, and I think that's a great segue, right? A fear of, chasing your dreams and being bold, as you mentioned earlier. You mentioned you left home at 16. You wanted to become, I think you said, a folk singer, which is I'd love to hear that story, but
Well,
also to become an actor.
Yeah, I mean, I left to pursue some kind of. I wanted to entertain people, and I fortunately could sing, and I played the guitar, and folk singing was my roots, and that's what I did when I got to Toronto. I sang in a coffee house. I met this girl Judy, and our act is called Vic and Judy, and we sang in the coffee house, and we passed around a hat at the end of our set. We just threw these songs together. She had a really beautiful voice, and I was good at harmony in those days. And I rarely sing anymore, and I miss it. I'm trying to get back to it, but I've lost that. It takes a lot of work as you get older to maintain your voice, but that's what I did. And I did for many, many years. And then I was in a singing group, and we recorded an album. We came to New York. We were on the Ed Sullivan Show, which nobody in this age group will know what that was. But the Johnny Carson Show, you may have heard of. We did that. So I had a very kind of mixed career, but it was all music in the beginning.
And when did you make your transition and journey to becoming an actor? And what advice would you give to maybe some of our campers who are, wanting to pursue a career in acting or entertainment or even music?
It's really simple. If you can do anything else, that's what you should be doing. I mean, anything else. You may want to, you may want to be a stockbroker, or you may want to be a lawyer. But if you have to do it, it's the only thing you can do, then you have to pursue it, and you have to work really hard, and it doesn't come easily, and you have to train, you have to learn, you have to study, you have to work harder than you will ever imagine, and in the middle of it, you may give up, and if you have to give up, you can do something else. But it's a commitment.
And I think it's important, and I really love that you're sharing how many challenges there can be. What are the sort of things that you tell yourself when you come across those challenges, or when you have to dig deep for something that you really want? How do you approach those challenges?
I think it's you have to face that the fear of humiliating yourself, of failing, of not. I mean, the not getting the job, because most of the jobs you don't get, and you have to know that you are the only person who can do what you do. You can't, comparing yourself to other people is a real trap. You think, if only I could sing or look like he or she, if only I could write songs like, you can't. No one else can. And it's a concept that we don't really think about, but I do, because I had to learn not to compare myself. It's really important that you believe in yourself, and you just do the best you can do, and trust that.
I remember, I think the first time I heard it, my dad told me when I was growing up, when I was much younger, and I think I was trying to be an athlete, and I was comparing myself to other people, other athletes, and I was like, if only I could run as fast as this guy or jump as high, maybe something would be different. And he told me, right. Comparing yourself is the best way to guarantee you'll always be unhappy. And
completely.
And I've carried that. I think that's great advice, because I think at times when we have diabetes as well, we can look to the left and the right in our everyday life and say, my friend doesn't have diabetes, or this person doesn't, and I wish I didn't. And that's a way to stay really stuck.
It's a trap, and also it's seductive, because then it's easier not to do the work you have to do. You can say, well, I'm a diabetic, I can't do that, or I'm not good enough to do that. And that's something I never did. I always felt I was blessed with talent. I had talent, I knew that, but I was also blessed with a firm. My parents supported me, and I got as a young person, I got a lot of support as to do what I do. And you have to go where that is. If I had to leave home to do it, to go to, because there were no schools in my town where I could study acting or music. And so I went to Toronto, and I found a community like, like you do with diabetes.
Yeah, and I think the diabetes community, being involved in camp, those are the things that really can propel us to, face those fears and give us the courage to really chase those dreams. And
Yes.
sometimes that just becomes with being a little bit more open and a little bit more confident, as you mentioned, kind of wearing
Yes.
the pod, wearing the CGM.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
when you're on set, do you have conversations with people? How do you approach when you're going on a new set? Maybe explaining to the crew.
Yeah.
Have you ever, how do you approach those challenges?
It took me a long time to just kind of be, out of the closet with all of this, because it was, I thought in some way it was going to hamper me, or hamper, and then when I realized, I think it was really by the time well, in the theater, I didn't really talk about it all that much, but people knew, because I would always say, I'm a type 1 diabetic, so I shouldn't really have those cookies, and then take one. But it was really, I really think back to Alias, and I was significantly older than I, to be doing. I mean, I should have been doing it years before that, but because we were working like 12, 14, 15-hour days sometimes, and I didn't have all the accoutrement that I now have, all the Dexcom and the pods and everything. So I was taking shots, and I think during that period I did get the first Medtronic pump, which took me a long time because I was so vain. I didn't want something hanging off of me, and I thought it was going to be, and then, boy, that was life-changing when I finally did that. And guess what? No one said anything, no one cared, and it was amazing. But it was Alias, and I worked with Jennifer Garner and Bradley Cooper and Ron Rifkin, and some great Michael Vartan, and these people. And I mean, Jennifer got to the point where she could see. She would say, "He needs orange juice, Richard." I said, "No, I'm fine. What? And then I would get angry, because when your blood sugar goes, you just. And she said, just get some orange juice." And she was amazing at that. And she has remained a very close friend, and she is she's remarkable in her empathy and her compassion, and she really was a rock for me. Everybody was. They were all.
How important is it as well? I think when you're working with someone so closely who doesn't have diabetes, but they can become close to you and grow with you, that you then have trust with them to confide in them when your blood sugar is going low, or that they can sense things about you. What's that like? I feel like at times my friends have said the same. I had a training basketball who could look me in the eye. He said, "I can always tell when you're about to be low because your eyes start darting around everywhere." And so he'd be like, "Hey, go get a Gatorade." And I also would get kind of angry or bristle up about it.
Right, of course. Well, it's a feeling of safety. It's a feeling of I'm okay. I'll be okay. Like if it's 3 or 4 in the morning and you're on a hillside shooting somebody, and in the dark, and it's raining and everything, but you think, but I've got it's like having a buddy. It's like the buddy system, and it's really like, put your hands up, and they know what to do. And I believe, and I've always believed, that there are more people who have compassion and come from a place of love, and that's what I have always tried to do in my life. And I think when you give that, you get that back.
100% agree. I think most people, if we treat each other with kindness, I think most people will surprise you with their capacity for good. I really believe that, especially in times like these where it seems like everyone's really far apart.
It's the best thing you can do. I mean, the best thing you can do if you're feeling depressed or anxious or troubled or put upon is do something for someone else. Just do something. Go to the food bank and hand out food, or make sure your neighbor gets something. And honestly, the minute you make that decision, it changes everything.
And I love that. And I think, so much of camp is about helping your brother and sister to your left and your right with diabetes. Do you?
That's what I felt for the first time, and allowed it. You have to allow people to be kind to you. That's the other thing, and it's tricky sometimes.
Especially when your blood sugar is low, because you don't want to be kind to anybody.
Yeah. When your blood sugar is low, it's like just get some sugar, get some juice, get quick.
These days, you are more involved in the community, sometimes online, working as well with Beyond Type 1 and the American Diabetes Association, like we are working here today. You were the voice and the narrator of the Bike Beyond documentary. You have a great documentary voice, by the way. I have to give you a compliment.
Oh, thank you.
That way. What is it like for you to see the diabetes community sort of expanding and growing online, after living with diabetes for 50 years and seeing people who are new being embraced and finding community?
It's I think it's kind of amazing, and also I'm so grateful that I'm alive today to be a part of it in any way I can, because when I was growing up, we didn't know I didn't know anybody, until I went to the Camp Banting, and that was my first exposure to other people. And it's now, because it reaches across the world. So there are these kids in poor countries that can, God willing, have a way to get on a computer. It's just so important, because the feeling of isolation is really it can make things really, really seriously go wrong. And I think that's a huge part of staying healthy, is that mindset and of being in communication with others. I think it really makes it changes your chemistry.
I agree. And you mentioned earlier, just the buddy system, just having somebody, whether they live near you or go to your school or not, but you can get in touch with them and just have a conversation. It's just nice to be able to say, yeah, I understand. I see you. I hear you. I understand what that's like.
Right. It's amazing. It makes it all kind of possible and okay. And that's just a powerful, powerful thing.
And Victor, I think on that note, I'd love for you to, if there's any advice that you would give out in that same kind of vein for any campers who are watching this today, maybe feeling a little bit isolated, maybe feeling like they're missing out on an important thing like camp, and maybe just having a tough day, what would you say to somebody out there who just needs a word of encouragement?
I would say you're entitled to feel what you feel, but also remember that you're not alone, that a lot of people are feeling, particularly in this pandemic and this isolation, people everywhere are going through it. And you have to remember that you share that with them. And the best thing you can do is to reach out and just, and as I said earlier, do something for them, because the minute you do that, it changes everything in you. And that's where I think that's almost the best thing you can do. And also focus on what you have and not on what you don't have, because you have probably more than you realize. First of all, you have the blue sky, and you have hopefully food, and you have hopefully a family. And I'm talking about people who are, who have some more than they realize, and who are privileged. And just remember that's you have a gift.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think, just living from a place of gratitude more often is just a great way to sort of anchor ourselves and continue to move forward.
Gratitude is the key.
Well, I will say I'm grateful for your time today and for coming on and for giving back to Imagine Camp and this Imagine Spotlight series. Thank you so much for all the work that you do on the front lines for people with diabetes, and being such a great example for people like me. And also behind the scenes for all the work that you do with Beyond Type 1 and the ADA. I'm grateful for you, and thanks so much for coming to Imagine Camp.
I just want to say hello and goodbye to all of you who are doing this virtual camp. And I know it's not the real thing, but it's something, and we have to be grateful for what we have. And I want to thank Rob, ADA, Beyond Type 1, everybody who is doing their best to help us all. We can really grow and learn from this. I don't always feel that way, but I do right now. Have a great, great summer.